The difference between buyers in the US and buyers in Canada, maybe just talk a little bit about that. We touched on it about the percentage of population that's owned by pension funds, but one of the things that we notice is there's a lot more deal velocity in the US than there is in Canada. Maybe you guys can talk about a little bit why you see that.
I'm not sure what you mean.
I'll take a kick at it.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the first things that I was told when I graduated from business school is don't build a business. It was by Richard Rainwater, who was the guy who created the Bass Empire, as the architect of it. And he said, the biggest mistake a young person can make, and it make it often, is building a business around a strategy that says that they're smarter than everyone else, because you're not smarter than everyone else. And so one of the things that we look at in terms of market selections is something that we've determined called a liquidity index. And so for every one of our markets, we'll look and say, what percent of apartments are sold in a given year on average versus the entire inventory of apartments in that market. And so when you look across all 10 of our markets, we have a liquidity index of 9 years. That basically means that in 9 years, 100% of the apartments in our markets have been sold. There's just a massive amount of liquidity. Now, if you take higher profile markets like San Francisco, like New York, like Boston, like LA, it takes 40 years for all the apartments to turn over versus 9 years. Why? Because there's a preponderance of institutional investors in those better markets. And institutional investors are really smart. They got it nailed. They know that real estate's a long game, and they don't let go of assets. In our markets, it's just not mature. They're just not as sophisticated, to be honest with you. You've got, rich kids having trust funds getting unlocked. I mean, literally, we're negotiating one right now. You've got a lot of divorces. You've got cowboys that go in and are undercapitalized, and people get squeezed because their loan's maturing. I'm not saying that I'll never go to and invest in New York City, but I probably won't. Its liquidity index is 50 years in terms of its apartments turning over. I bet you if I go there, I'm competing against someone who's a fourth generation real estate owner, and his brother-in-law's in the zoning office of the municipality. I'm not smart enough to compete against that. So that's basically why we pick our markets.